And for those of you that are new to this class or new to Lungri Tonka Centre, my name's Miffy. I'm the program coordinator here at Lungri Tonka Centre. And I've been the program coordinator for over 20 years now, but I have a particular fondness for the introduction courses for so-called beginners, because I think we really need to have a bridge between the amazing wisdom and insight of the Buddha and our modern day life. And trying to bridge that is really tricky because we can get stuck in all sorts of cultural problems or translation problems. So that's my real utter passion. So this course, 3 Higher Trainings for Dummies, it's actually a little bit of a risque title for the hoity-toity Buddhists. So I'm certainly not saying that any of you are dummies, but it's really just, you know, those dummies books, how fantastic they are. Really nicely set out, cartoons written by people that are really skilled in the field. So, you know, I kind of thought, because I totally underestimated what the 3 Higher Trainings were about, I thought it was really important that we could share it at the beginning of the path. So to set the scene, I thought I could start with a question about what if you could develop life skills, human being skills, not just for this life or even for the next life, but to liberate yourself completely from suffering and all of its causes, to eradicate suffering forever. What if that was a possibility? So this course is kind of based on the 3 Higher Trainings, which is just about that, you know, most of the time we've been going through our life and this crazy world and just trying to deal with things, and we're kind of running to catch up the whole time, just trying to keep our head above water. But what if instead of just dealing with each individual crisis as it came along, we could deal with them all at once? And what if we could, all the effort that we put into our skills now, you know, when we die, then we lose them all, don't we? So what if we didn't lose those skills? What if they went along with us on that very subtle mind stream from life to life? And what if all of those skills, instead of just being used on how to learn to cook or drive a car or raise a family, that we actually looked deeply at what is the most we can do as a human being? So from the Buddhist point of view, the most that we can do as a human being is become completely liberated from cyclic existence, from the round, as they say, the machinery of samsara, the constant uncertainty and the ups and downs. So the 3 Higher Trainings is about the wisdom realizing emptiness that cuts the self-grasping ignorance at the root. But to be able to do that, to be able to cut the cause of suffering completely, instead of just kind of try to fix things as they go wrong, to cut the root of all the problems, we have to have single-pointed concentration. We've got to be able to concentrate and really focus without getting distracted. And to be able to do that, that depends on having pure ethical conduct. It depends on feeling okay in our own skin. And if we have those 3 things, they're good for this life, but they're also, they become causes for real, genuine, lasting happiness. So I do have a screen share that I will get up now, that I'll kind of put up and down as we go along. So the 3 Higher Trainings for Dummies, first class, it's only a 3-week course, so quite short. And I had thought that it'd be about an hour, but we may actually go an hour and a half, 6:30 to 8, just because I put more things in. So what we're going to have a look at, what the 3 Higher Trainings are that I just briefly outlined, how they make our life better now, how they can actually overcome all the 6 factors that cause disturbing emotions to arise. So this comes from another course that I lead called Ancient Wisdom for Modern Life. and we'll see how they interact. Mostly the purpose for this course is how, if we develop these 3 higher trainings, we can completely overcome all problems and thus end our suffering forever. So it's worth having a really big vision like this, having the courage to think this big. We're going to get everything else in between anyway, but why put limits on what our purpose can be? Now, I had an idea. What I wanted to do, just as a little bit of an icebreaker, was run a poll. So I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see the poll or not, but I'm launching the polling just to see who's here and how long you've been coming along and so on. So the poll questions, if you can see it. How have you visited Lungery Tumpa Centre before? You can tick as many as you like. Number 1, I've been to the centre before in person, before the lockdown from coronavirus, or I've done some Zoom classes already online, or this is my first class ever at Lungery Tumpa Centre, or this is the first time my cat or dog or budgie or anyone has joined us too. So let's see what the lay of the land is, who we have here. Normally, if we were in person, I'd get people to do a show of hands and things, but that's a bit tricky. So a poll is kind of nice to see. Now, 9 out of 11 people, or 9 out of 10 have voted. Still a little bit time to choose a few. Many times when you first come along to the centre, either in person or get the courage to go online and deal with the technology, it can be quite overwhelming, and you know, you're not sure where you stand. You think everybody else has been coming along for ages, but actually everybody feels like beginners. So we're all beginners. This is a beginner's course. Welcome. All right, so let's see, end the polling and share the results. The winner is, we've all been to the centre before, or most, 8 out of 9 people have been to the centre before. 7 out of 9 done classes already. 1 person first class ever. Fantastic, especially warm welcome to you. And also we have some cats or dogs joining as well too. That's very nice. Great way to share the Dharma. What an amazing opportunity for imprints. Oops. Great, fantastic. So with that, then let's just set our motivation for a moment to think about what our purpose can be. You know, we've got whatever the reason was that brought us here tonight. Could be all sorts of issues going on in life. It could be a question that you've been wondering about the meaning of life for a very, very long time. Could be a whole factor of things. Could be you just got a spare night. So it's always good to adjust our motivation so that we've got an attitude of sincerity and curiosity. So the sincerity part, that's the good-heartedness and the courage and that kind of thought that we want to get some genuine benefit ourselves, and also we can help others. We interact with others, we're responsible for others, so we can bring them the very best benefit. And then curiosity, that's kind of like the wisdom side of things, and so that it's not too heavy. You know, we can often get quite uptight about trying to understand everything all at once. But in that kind of spirit of being genuinely curious and enjoying discovering things and kind of relaxing your mind and not having to feel that you've got to understand everything all at once this moment, but just enjoy the journey. So sincerity and curiosity, and thinking, of course, for ourselves, but not just ourselves. What we do with our own mind can affect the whole world. So we can set our motivation also is that the benefit for the whole world. It's spread out like ripples on a pond. All right, so back to our screen share. Very quickly, I thought we'd just go over the perfect storm, because generally what we're experiencing is the perfect storm all the time. We've got all these various factors that push us about throughout life. And these are the 6 factors that stimulate disturbing emotions. And sometimes we've got all of them, sometimes others are stronger or lesser. But the thing to take from this is that it's not just one thing that causes us problems. Even something like the coronavirus, we might think it's one thing that is the focus of all of our angst and our worry and our problems. But there's a whole lot of things that come together that mean that our mind becomes disturbed, and then we have disturbing emotions arise, and then we act on them, and then we complicate matters. And so these 6 factors are a way of kind of breaking it down as all the different things that contribute to that perfect storm of unhappiness. Breaking them down like this also means that we can get started on each one just a little bit, and then it becomes doable instead of just overwhelming. So just really briefly, just so that you kind of know what they are, because it's not the main topic of the day, but the first 2, society and the media. So who our peer group, our society, who we spend time with, is who we end up being like. It can be the class or the culture that we're born into, or it can be a group that we decide to identify with. Also, who we spend time with. If everybody else is really distracted or really negative, it rubs off on us, doesn't it? So it's something to keep in mind. And then the media where we get our teachings and our advice from is really crucial. And it's worth questioning, just like the Buddha encouraged us to question everything. Under questioning, things should become clearer. So with the media, we succumb to a lot of propaganda, to a lot of spin, even if we're highly educated about it. So at least to make sure that our sources are authentic, including Buddhist teachings, that the sources are authentic. The next 2, the seed and the object. So the seed is actually the readiness within our own mind to experience happiness or unhappiness. It's kind of a potential or a readiness within us. And it can be quite latent there until an object comes along, what we'd call a trigger, till we're triggered. And then unhappiness arises or stress arises, and usually we blame the object without looking within to see what was the propensity that I had. Because everyone reacts to things in a different way. So both of those come into play, and we'll talk today quite a bit about that seed, that real deep, substantial cause within our own mind for why we even experience problems. And then the last 2, attention or distorted attention. So the way that we read things wrong. We read a situation wrong. We have high hopes or expectations or projections or assumptions, distortions depending on what our cultural baggage is, and all sorts of things. And so we have distorted attention instead of clarity about a situation. And the whole thing is propelled by our habits, how we just instinctually respond, which may not be so good. As Corey often says, we have unfortunate emotional episodes, which I really like the way he phrases it that way. And so then they become our default way of responding to situations. We end up being the kind of person that we don't want to be, just driven by habit. So these are the 6 factors, and the Buddhist approach is to see that, yes, our whole experience of life is influenced by external factors, some things quite profoundly, but the kind of lasting happiness that we want doesn't come from outside of us. We have to create it within our own mind. It's got to come from within. If it comes from outside, as Corey calls it, resource-driven happiness, or we can think of it as circumstantial happiness, then it's quite fragile and it's beholden to our circumstances. So, you know, we all want real, genuine, lasting happiness and freedom from suffering. So how to do that? We've got to look within. All right, so now let's cut to the chase to get to the 3 higher trainings. So they're called higher because they're, even though they're skills for life, and you can find some of these in lots of self-help books, they're aiming for a lot more than that, a much higher goal. And the goal is complete liberation from the ups and downs of existence and from suffering forever. So the goal of personal liberation and enlightenment. So it can be just personal liberation, and also these three higher trainings are taken into the Mahayana path. To be able to, we need these skills to be able to become a fully enlightened Buddha to help others as well. And we need all 3 to cut the root of suffering forever. So if we want to get rid of problems forever, not just get one problem, another one arises, we need these 3. And there's this beautiful analogy of how we can relate to them. So cultivating ethics is the main thing that creates happiness. And this is the torso, the strong body. So even if we don't develop the rest, having ethics means we're not going to create more problems in our life. And it's also that what we're doing here with ethics, it's not just having an idea. Like people say, hey, I'm not racist, but, and then they go and do something really racist. You know, that having ethics means we embody our values. So in this analogy of, you know, cutting the root of suffering, the strength, the whole foundation of it is our ethical conduct and our values. So at the moment we're bound to cyclic existence because we're under control of our minds, and our minds are under control of our delusions. And as a result, we're in a constant state of distraction. And the method to actually start on is with ethics, because we stop creating more problems. And we can actually, just with ethics alone, have a fairly good, decent life, happy life. Having the ethics also means that anything that we study doesn't just become intellectual knowledge, and it means that we don't end up having a double standard. So really embodying all of those things that are highly meaningful for us. So that's the strong body. Then the second one, overcoming distraction with concentration. So if we don't have concentration, we can't stabilize our realizations. We can't integrate any inside realizations that we have. We can't focus on anything, including anything good. If we develop our concentration, then we can stop panicking. We'll be able to actually have the confidence to sort out our problems. So concentration is the 2 arms holding the axe. We need to have strong concentration whilst we're wielding this sharp object of the axe. So the axe destroys the negative seeds with wisdom. So the axe is the wisdom that cuts through the root of suffering. So we need that concentration, because otherwise we'll end up like those people in Funniest Home Videos that they're holding the axe and they think they're so much stronger than they are, and it tips it and they just go whoop backwards. And, you know, it might be funny if it's just holding a cup and a saucer, but if it's holding a sharp object, we can get into trouble. And it's the same with our intellect, that if we cannot really focus on a train of thought and bring it to its ultimate conclusion, all of our thinking and our intellect can lead to nihilism. It can lead to hopelessness and cynicism. it can lead to us coming to conclusions that are out of step with reality, and then nothing will go right with our life. So it's not just enough to be smart. We have to really be able to wield that intellect and come to deep insights about the nature of reality. So with this wisdom, then if we can do that, you know, with the support of ethics, we've got our concentration, the two hands, and then we have the axe, and that can cut the root of suffering forever. And that's amazing, because the Buddha talked about 84,000 delusions. So not the $64,000 question, but the $84,000 question of the 84,000 delusions. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't want to have to go through each one individually. I'm just tired thinking about it. But with this wisdom, it just severs all of them at once, in one go. One of the other analogies that they use, it's just like we have a pot on the stove that's constantly boiling with distraction and the disturbing emotions. And so we can put in some antidotes, we put in cold water, and it stops it boiling for a while. But then, because it's still on the stove, we haven't actually extinguished that heat, it boils up again. So we put more cold water in, we put ice in, we're fine for a while, and then it boils up again. So what about if we just took it off the stove? How amazing, and how much energy could we liberate then? So that's what this wisdom is about. And yes, with all three, then it becomes dynamite. Then we can, in just one lifetime, they say, actually cut the root of suffering forever. Okay, so here's just a little reading from Yangtze Rinpoche that kind of sums this up really nicely. So this is a book called Practicing the Path. It's a really good Lam Rim book. So Lam Rim is the Graduated Path to Enlightenment. And this one is a commentary on the Lam Rim. But Yangtze Rinpoche taught in English, and he taught to Westerners. And it's a compilation of many of his teachings over 10, 20 years. So it's with quite a Western sensibility while still being very authentic Buddhism. So I really like the tone of the book. Anyway, this is a little bit of an introduction to these three higher trainings. So at the moment, we're bound to cyclic existence because we're under the control of our minds, and our minds are under the control of our delusions. As a result, we find ourselves in a state of complete distraction all the time, consistently unfocused, and unable to apply ourselves to the meaningful pursuit of a spiritual path. The method to overcome this unfortunate state is the practice of the first of the three higher trainings, the training in ethics. However, in order to completely subdue the mind, accomplishing the higher training in ethics alone is not sufficient. We must also develop our minds in meditative concentration. Without this basis of single-pointed placement and strength of meditative equipoise, we will be unable to stabilize our realizations and unable to focus our minds on virtue, the cause of happiness. And even then, eventually we'll find that developing the mind in higher training in ethics and higher training in concentration is not sufficient. In order to free our minds completely from the control of the delusions and their seeds, we also need to practice the training in higher wisdom. So that's the overview, and I'll come back to this analogy again and again of the body, the two arms of concentration, the body of ethics, and the sword of wisdom. Do I have any questions yet? Have you got any questions at all? If you do, you've got time to put them into the chat and it'll flash up for me and I'll be able to see. So usually when they talk about the three higher trainings, they talk in the order of ethics, concentration, and wisdom. But for us beginners, I thought we'd go in the other order. We'd cut straight to the chase with wisdom, which is the big context, and probably the most difficult one. So I'm only going to really touch on the main points that I thought are really relevant to us as beginners. Okay, so, oh, thanks, Beth. Right, so here we have this wonderful quote from His Holiness the Dalai Lama about wisdom. And it's really applicable, isn't it? We are at the center of all of our troubles. It's therefore best to work at understanding our true nature first. So that's really why I thought we've got to start with the wisdom first, the wisdom of understanding who we are actually. Because the wisdom that we need isn't just any type of wisdom. The wisdom that we need is a specific type of wisdom, which is understanding reality, nothing less than that. You know, we can have a wisdom of how to speak French or how to drive a car or really amazing philosophy, but the wisdom to cut the root of suffering is the wisdom understanding the nature of reality and how we exist as individuals, the nature of this self that experiences problems. So it also means that we get to start with our own experience rather than kind of branching off into it being an abstract theory. And don't get me wrong, I really like abstract theories. I find them infinitely fascinating, but we have to bridge them with our own experience, because otherwise when we have problems, what happens is that we know more and more, but we also become more and more miserable. So starting with applying everything to our own experience. And what this wisdom that we need is, because just developing kindness isn't enough, just developing patience isn't enough, just developing our compassion isn't enough. We have to directly combat our mistaken, distorted attitudes, our distorted emotions, and our ignorance. We've got to directly counter it. And it can't just be done by working on these emotions. And actually, working on these emotions won't be very effective if we don't get the basis right. If we don't get this basis of wisdom right, even if we work on our emotions trying to be compassionate, we're going to burn out. Or even if we try to develop our love and our kindness, it's going to have favoritism. There's going to be some people in the world that we just cannot extend our care towards. So it's crucial, even just to develop those good qualities, we have to have it held by this wisdom, understanding reality. So I thought, just to kind of bring it into our own experience, what's the most important thing that we need wisdom for? Like in your life, what are the things that you need a quality of wisdom for, or that you need to develop your wisdom for? What kind of issues or problems or events? Put them in the chat. You've got time. What do you need wisdom for at the moment? Solving problems? Yes. So does anyone else have that experience of like, what do I do here? Do I do this or I do that? I don't know. We need wisdom to develop patience? Yes. Yeah, because patience, isn't it? We kind of talk ourselves through patience. So how do we talk ourselves through that? How do we talk ourselves down from blowing a top? Wisdom to handle stress. Yes, that's right. And this wisdom, understanding the nature of reality, of phenomena, and the nature of ourselves, directly speaks to handling stress. Because if we get that right, we won't ever get stressed. So instead of having to keep putting the cold water into the pot of stress to cool it down, it just won't ever boil. To solve moral dilemmas. Yes, that's right. Yep. we need to have really clear wisdom for that. So they're all things I relate to. Guiding, parenting, teaching others. Yes, parenting, that's right. Because, and this is clearly where wisdom needs to be brought into our own experience, isn't it? Because you can have all the ideas about parenting in the world and then you have kids. And it all changes, doesn't it? And then you can have an idea of what you want to teach your kids, but how do you teach them? You have to model it, isn't it? And that only comes from really integrating that wisdom. To develop true confidence, yes. Yes, because too, confidence comes from, it's a side effect, isn't it? It's not something we directly try and cultivate. Confidence is a result. Yep. And wisdom to handle anxiety that's often unwarranted or created through distorted ways of thinking. That's right. So anxiety and depression, and then all the other kind of disturbing emotions that are driving those, the root of all of them, the root of all stress, all anxiety, all depression, all problems that overwhelm us, all of it, the root of it is a particular ignorance of not understanding how the world exists and how we exist. So spot on, everybody. So there are many different types of wisdoms that we can develop. And actually for beginners, and I haven't got a slide about this, but it's fairly simple, that we're often taught about the three wisdoms of listening, reflection, and meditation. So in terms of all the wisdoms to develop as beginners, these three, if we get these right, we're set. Then all of the rest of our studies become like a medicine to us. We'll never become jaded or cynical. Or our studies won't mean that, occasionally get all these brainy people on Buddhist discussion groups and things, and they end up arguing about philosophy, and it's like, if we haven't actually integrated our wisdom becomes a bit unhinged. So the three things for us to develop. So the wisdom of listening is actually the one that I sometimes think of it as the wisdom of research. It's where you come to class, you're reading, all the various different books and podcasts, YouTube things. So we're gathering all the information. And it's also where our hunger for knowledge, our thirst for knowledge comes in, of really feeding our intellect. So this one, we need it. We need to be able to listen properly and gather all the information, but we can't leave it there. And this is kind of the curse of the intelligent, that if we can get ourselves into a trap of think that's all there is. And so once we've finished one amazing book about philosophy and the nature of reality, we want to read the next one. So it kind of becomes like the sushi train of philosophy or the sushi train of spirituality. I just want something more advanced. I want another one and another one. So it's just the first stage, this wisdom of listening. The second one, the wisdom of reflection, means that you take all that knowledge and you contemplate it in terms of your own life. What does that mean for me? So you have all the wisdom of the Buddha. What does that mean for parenting? What does that mean with making moral decisions at work? And so you apply it directly to your own life. Otherwise, it's just still in the realm of intellect. So it means integrating it. And again, that's why the Buddha's wisdom can become medicine for our mind, because the medicine, instead of just collecting more and more medicine and sticking it on the shelf, it's actually taking the medicine, internalizing the medicine every day, applying it to our own life, to our own specific circumstances, making all the examples personal. And I can guarantee you, if you start doing this, you're going to wish that you just had read something more simple. You're not going to want to just hunger for more and more information or infotainment anymore. You're just going to want it broken down into something really simple to start with. But that's kind of a good sign. Because otherwise, many times we can be questioning about things and we can end up becoming quite despondent or suicidal. And if all we've got is just this kind of researching, reading stuff without reflecting on our own life, without thinking, hey, has anybody else ever been suicidal? Was the Buddha suicidal? What did he come up with? What did Socrates come up with? What did Nietzsche come up with? Has anybody else been through this before? And how did they apply it? So that's the wisdom of listening, then the wisdom of reflection, contemplating it, even playing devil's advocate, asking all those questions, how does it apply to my life? And then the third one is called the wisdom of meditation. So this doesn't mean sitting there going, what meditation means is familiarizing your mind. So the wisdom of meditation means that you become so familiar with your Dharma wisdom that when the unexpected happens, that's your default. That's what you go to automatically. Your Dharma wisdom automatically comes up. It means when you get stressed, automatically what you remember is your Dharma wisdom, what the three types of patience are and how to practice them. Or when you start feeling a bit frightened or intimidated by somebody, you remember about loving kindness, about showing care, about caring for others as much as oneself, instead of just getting more defensive. Or when someone's yelling at you, instead of mirroring back the yelling, your Dharma wisdom comes up about patience and understanding how we're all suffering. So wouldn't that be amazing if that became our default? If when things went wrong, we automatically responded well, instead of just automatically getting stressed and anxious and depressed and acting badly and all of those things. So that's that third wisdom, the wisdom of meditation, or the wisdom of familiarizing our mind. And that's where the real change happens. So it goes from intellect to kind of bridging it to your own life, and then it goes to changing your own mind. So does that make sense? Those three, if we're going to develop a specific type of wisdom, those three wisdoms to start with? It's like a really good rule of thumb that whatever you study, then it can only turn out well. Any questions have come up yet? Before we get to the tricky bits. Yep, great. Beth, that's right. Listen, reflect, and meditation. How long does it take? How long does it take? How long's the coast of Britain? How long does it take to become enlightened? It doesn't have to take that long. You can take the high road or the low road. You can take the windy road, might take a bit longer, or you can take the really fast road. The really fast road, it can be in just a few years, from when you first meet the Dharma to becoming a Buddha, becoming enlightened. Or you can do a lot of preparation, and then at death time, where your window of opportunity opens up, then you can just blitz it. I remember Venerable Gyatso down in Bendigo at one of the retreats with Lama Zopa Rinpoche. He said, actually, the fact that we're here now as a human being with an interest in the Dharma, wanting to learn about these things, means not only have we had a connection from the past, but we're taking up where we left off. And actually, in the scheme of things, we're almost there. We're not that far off. So how long it takes also, it's not like we can't do anything to help others before we become liberated ourselves. All the way along, we can take others with us. So what do we need to do? This is what's going to determine how long it's going to take. So let's go back to the wisdoms, the higher training in wisdom. And here's something: all phenomena, everything, arise by the collection of many conditions together. And because of the collection of many conditions, there is no inherence. So what this means is that this word inherence, things don't exist inherently or exactly as they appear or from out there appearing to be true. So I'm just setting the scene, and we'll have some more concrete examples in a moment. But I just wanted you to get the actual words so you start to get used to them. So all phenomena arise because the causes and conditions come into play, and then a phenomena arises, like us, for instance. You know, we have our genetic material, and we have our education, and we have whether we've eaten or not today, and all of those things play together as to what type of person we are today. And then how we respond to others. And how we respond to others then creates a reverberation that determines what kind of person we'll be tomorrow. So because there's this collection of many conditions coming together, there's no real inherence, meaning there's no real me. So what happens, though, is we confuse the dual nature of reality. We confuse relative and ultimate because we make this fatal mistake. It's the root of all of our problems and suffering. So everything that we think is the real me isn't. And everything that we have in common with others is. But it's never how we feel. It's completely counterintuitive. Not only is it a mistake, but it's a mistake that we are so familiar with, that we've meditated on without even knowing, that it is completely habitual down to an instinctual level. We make an instinctual mistake and compound it with an intellectual mistake. So no wonder we have problems, no wonder we suffer. So a really easy way to think about this is that things do not exist in the way they first appear, including problems. Problems do not exist in the way they first appear. So something appears and it's a problem and we just think that's it. Oh no, but it's not necessarily true. I mean, one amazing example is just for us personally here at Lungaree Tangpa Centre. The coronavirus and the enforced isolation, you might think it's a terrible problem, but it doesn't exist in the way it first appears, because from this terrible problem of not being able to hold personal classes, now we have this whole online system of courses. And for years, I've wanted to have our classes online and never been able to, because it was always in the important but not urgent basket. And then suddenly coronavirus came along and then it became important and urgent. And now we have this boon, this incredible possibility that people, you know, it's a cold, wet night and you don't have to get out of your pajamas. You can come to class. People who can't drive at night can come to class. So what at first looked like an insurmountable problem actually isn't that way. Online classes are fantastic. Yes, I agree. Not everybody agrees, but I agree. So I'm kind of, you know, treading gently here. So if we're not burdened with these kind of misconceptions or projections, if we don't judge the book by its cover, then we'll see how things first appear, but we won't jump to conclusions. We won't act on misinformation. We won't be burdened with misconceptions. It's almost like knowing that things exist like an illusion. So even though when things change and we experience uncertainty and change, and it's not very pleasant, and the appearance, how things appear, is bad, horrible, but this isn't necessarily true. They're not necessarily bad and horrible. They just appear that way at first. And even if we just remind ourselves about that, we can relax a little bit, and then we give some space to actually see the bigger picture. So it all depends. It depends on so many different factors. So it's kind of due to our ignorance that we make these mistakes, that we can't see reality clearly. It's not due to that we're bad or that we're evil. It's just that we have incorrect assumptions. We're operating on a mistake. And because of that, then we impute all sorts of other things onto it. So if we had to just stop with the social isolation, the lockdown is bad, that's it, I hate it, then we'd never have a chance to benefit from online classes, because we couldn't even bear the thought of it. And I know that's what's happened to some people, that I've never seen them online. It breaks my heart because they're missing out on so much fun. But it comes from grasping at inherence like this. So I've got a really nice example for you. The movies. Who here's ever gone to the movies? So the movies is an interesting one, isn't it? Because we know the appearances aren't true, and yet we enjoy the appearances. The movies, they affect us. So, it's quite an interesting one, this. It's so interesting because we even pay money, don't we, to be able to go to the movies, even though we know it's not true. So even though it's a fiction, it's a dependent arising in that all these, the actors and the story and everything came together to create an experience, and then we have that experience. Our adrenaline soars, or we cry, we have to blow our nose, all of those things. Even though it's a fiction, emotions still arise, we still interact. So in the same way with our life, how things first appear, we're like those people that first saw the movies. I think the first movie that was ever shown was actually in Australia, and it was of a train. It was the Salvation Army. They filmed it, of a train, a steam train coming towards you, and they played it in the cinema, and there was a stampede. Everyone ran out of the cinema because they couldn't separate. They saw it as inherently true. So it doesn't mean that we go, oh, things don't exist, because the movie is there, but it is a dependent arising. There's all these things that interact for us to have an experience. And it's the same with our life. There's all these things that interact. And so at the movies, when it's scary, we're going, oh, not looking, not looking. And we cover our eyes and we try and get a different context, isn't it, to lessen the fear. So this is what we can do in our life too. We go, oh, hang on a second, this is just the appearance, it's not real. There's other things that are happening. If one thing changes, like someone holds your hand, or you've got a pillow to squish, or you turn the light on so you're not scared anymore, then everything changes. So it's the same with our life and with problems. Just one thing has to change and the pressure's off. So, Andrew, I have a Buddhist film not in my head all the time, but doesn't rate so well on Rotten Tomatoes. Yeah, I know, that's right. At least we've got to try and get a really good film, and that's part of it, isn't it? We can choose to have a really good film, not a B grade. So, that's changing the context, this meta-analysis. So let's have a look then at just some examples of how we jump the gun. And it's using one of my favorite terms, cognitive fusion. So cognitive fusion is how we exist. We fuse these two things together. How something appears and we fuse it to that something. How something looks is how it is. It's like believing the illusion. So those people running out of the theatre on the Stampede, that was cognitive fusion. So as we go through these examples, have a think if there's anything that you spot in your own life that you do, an example where you have cognitive fusion. So there's a few different things. So fusing the behavior with the person. Sorry, I'm just going to get them all up now. So here's a picture of a child chucking a tantrum, roll on the floor, whoa, screaming. So it looks like there's an out of control child. And in the heat of the moment, before we censor ourselves, we might go, oh, that stupid child, or that, you know, outrageous child, or whatever it is. If we've got a little bit of space within our mind, we might go, ah, that child acting badly. That person's beloved child having a tantrum. So we kind of wind it back a little bit. We haven't totally fused it. And then we go, you know, so is it a bad child? No, it's not a bad child. It's a suffering child. They're suffering after attachment. I want the lollies and I can't get it. Or, you know, tired. I'm so tired. And then they have a tantrum. So then we go, oh no, it's not a bad child. It's a suffering child. So if a child's having a tantrum, they're demonstrating that they're suffering, not that they're evil. Same like with a person yelling at you. We go, oh, angry person, but actually it's a person who's overwhelmed by their anger. It's a person demonstrating their suffering, but we see the face anger. And with this one, with the child, you know, someone else has kind of, you know, pointed out to me, it's not just a bad child, but a child with bad behavior. Not just a child with bad behavior, but a child suffering, expressing aversion. From a Buddhist point of view, you can take it even a step further, and you can go, it's not just a child, a suffering child, or a child expressing aversion, but it's a potential Buddha screaming to be liberated. So that's the metacognition, a potential Buddha screaming to be liberated. But how often do we see that when they're chucking a tantrum? Yes, attachment being thwarted by wise parenting. That's right. But Helene, don't you have to say that to yourself to keep up the courage? Because who wants to be a baddie? So fusing the behavior of the person, you know, what we do is we start by using our words, by reframing it. And metacognition, a budding Buddha, trying to burst forth. Then we have a couple of other ones, cognitive deficit and cognitive hyperactivity. So cognitive deficit is otherwise known as aversion or hatred. And it's where when something is difficult or unpleasant, we fuse that unpleasantness with the situation and therefore think it is bad. So if you have a fear of going to the dentist, I don't know if any of you do, you know, all you can think of is how terrified you are of going to the dentist. So you think, oh, a dentist, they're bad. And because of that, then you can't think of any of the good qualities of actually being able to fix up the infection, not getting blood poisoning, not dying, not losing all your teeth, all of those things, our health. But many people as children, you couldn't get them to the dentist. And even as adults, you couldn't get them to the dentist because we've fused the unpleasantness with the situation and we think bad experience, bad situation, bad thing. They've gone together. Whereas actually it's a bad experience. It's an unpleasant experience, but it's a good outcome. The other one, cognitive hyperactivity. In a pleasant situation, we overvalue all the enjoyable qualities, otherwise known as attachment. And here's someone who could very well be me on my third glass of champagne. Woohoo! 2 glasses were good, 3 glasses are better. So this is where we fuse the goodness with the champagne. And I don't know whether any of you have done this before, but, you know, if we actually fuse our happiness with the champagne, everything else follows. Therefore, more champagne, more happiness. Even more champagne, even more happiness. Champagne all night, happiness all night. But, you know, well, what I found, you get to the stage where you go, oh, God, I wish I hadn't have drunk that last one. I'm going to be sick. And then you wake up in the morning with a hangover, and it's a surprise. I mean, who planned the hangover? Nobody. I didn't plan it, but it happened. So that's cognitive hyperactivity. So I don't know if you can relate to these examples, or do you have any other examples that you know, from your own life where you've noticed that you just get it wrong each time, and then you notice in the end you go, oh, I knew that. But each time we suffer, we trigger ourselves and we suffer. Oh, politicians. So in what way, Bron? So do you have a cognitive deficit? It's tempting to say maybe the politicians have a cognitive deficit, but anyway, yes. With politicians, if we just focus on everything that they're doing wrong or that we disagree with, we forget the benefits. Yeah, that's right. We fuse all of the bad qualities that they have with the person. So just recently there was something on the news of Donald Trump, and they had photos of Donald Trump back in time. So when he was in his 20s and in quite good shape, and his pout looked sexy instead of just creepy. But then there was a picture of him as a kid, as a little kiddie. So none of us think of the whole life experience of Donald Trump, especially Donald Trump as a lonely kiddie, spoiled, no doubt, you know, all that money and everything, and probably not enough love, and probably not enough discipline, maybe no wisdom, maybe all the good intentions in the world. But we don't see that when we see what's happening now with Donald Trump. We don't see the whole person. So I find that one actually, for any politician, you know, you name it, Tony Abbott, he was once a little kiddie. So I may not be able to like what I know of Tony Abbott now, but who wishes harm on a little 2-year-old who's suffering, on a little baby who's suffering? No one wishes harm on them. And another politician, so Ronald Reagan, when he was close to death, and someone asked him about what was the most important thing that he did in his life. And he said this really extraordinary thing, that in his college years, in summer, he would volunteer each summer as a lifeguard. And one summer, someone was drowning in the river, and he jumped in and he was able to save them and give them mouth-to-mouth and bring them back to life. And he counted that as one of the most important things that he did in his life. You know, and I was really touched by that. So even he saw, you know, in the scheme of things, being an actor and good looking and charisma and having power, all of that, in the end, what actually mattered to him was being able to save another fellow human being. Being there and then being able to act and being able to do it to your fellow human being. So, yes, if we talk too much about politicians, we're going to have to go have a vino. Yeah, AA meeting now with budding Buddhists. Well, maybe not budding Buddhists, budding Buddhas. because really from a Buddhist point of view, any suffering, any stress that we have comes from being out of step with this, from exaggerating the situation one way or another. It comes from this fundamental ignorance. And because we have that, it's our mistaken minds that cause the suffering. And because we're out of step with reality, then of course our Buddha nature all the time is trying to burst forth, and it's not going to let us rest. It's like the computer thing. Information wants to be free. And our wisdom wants to be free. And how else is it going to get our attention except because we experience suffering? Because it shows us something's wrong here. There's a mistake. So that's kind of the metacognition. Anytime we experience suffering, it's not that there's actually a problem. It's showing us where to look to solve the problem. All right. So let's have a look. Here's another really fun thing. So if you've already seen this one this week, don't blow my cover, okay? But for those of you that are new to this particular thing, it's an example of dependent arising. So I just wanted to ask you, you can put in the chat, what do you see? What's everything that you see here? What are we looking at? And I'll just click up the chat. What are we looking at, folks? I'll give you time to type something in. What is it? I mean, just if you had to, a laptop. 2 coloured buttons on a rug. Yeah, I thought maybe there were 2 coloured buttons on some dying grass, but yeah, it could be bad RSL carpet or something. A licorice all sort. Possibly some blue sky. I mean, at first you might think, an open suitcase. That's a pretty interesting one. Yeah. Or 2 little keyboard buttons with the A and the B, though they're pretty small. But, so that's what we're seeing. And, whether it's a carpet or grass, trumps medication. Clearly not enough medication, right? But you all agree there's 2 colours. And there's a horizon, there's a dark coloured button on the top and a light coloured button down the bottom. Are we all kind of agreeing on that? And different backgrounds. Right. And so what our mind does is it sees this and it sees the appearance, and without us knowing it, we go, it's real. It exists exactly how it appears. So what I'd like you to do now is close one eye and hold your finger up so that it just obscures the horizon line. So it obscures the whole horizon line, and now look at those 2 buttons. What colour are they now? Then take your finger away. What colour are they now? Put your finger back again. So what's happening? It's as if they change, isn't it? It's as if these 2 things change. So this is what our inherent view does. It thinks that our experience comes from out there. But as you can see with this one, our experience comes from all the causes and conditions coming together. A horizon line, some nice shading, all the different context, and we think it's coming from there. We put our finger up and suddenly it's not coming from there anymore. Something else is. So this is a little bit like the discrepancy between ultimate reality and relative truth. And the thing to take from this is that ultimate and relative are like 2 sides of the same coin. They exist simultaneously, just like This exists simultaneously as a white and a grey button and two light grey buttons, simultaneously, without us having to change anything but our perspective. So it's super profound, isn't it? What do you reckon, folks? Put something in the chat for me. You like it? I'm glad you like it. I love it. I keep coming back to it all the time. It's like Homer, you know, window goes up, window goes down. So like finger there, finger away, finger there, finger away. So with optical illusions like this, I've got something to read to you from Yangtze Rinpoche, actually, that it's not an optical illusion, but, you know, from the time of the Buddha, it's something quite similar. How that relative and ultimate can exist at the same time. So one will find and hold two natures for all things, seeing in them ultimate reality and conventional reality. So that comes from Chandrakirti. And the example that they use is in daylight, when the sky is clear, although the stars have not gone anywhere, they cannot be seen. So this is analogous to what appears to the mind of an Arya being in meditative equipoise on emptiness, who sees the ultimate nature of phenomena. To this kind of consciousness, there is no appearance of true existence, no appearance of duality. I'll get that picture up again. No appearance of duality, no appearance of conventional reality at all. But when night falls and there is no sunlight, the stars shine brightly into the same sky. This is analogous to the way that phenomena appear to the mind of an ordinary being, who perceives existence with the stains and imprints of ignorance. Such an ordinary consciousness perceives what is pure as impure, what is suffering as happiness. And due to the force of the pollutions of the mind of ignorance, conventional existence appears to an ordinary consciousness. And what the problem is we believe it. So the analogy of the stars represents the dual nature of all phenomena. So the stars are there, but depending on the context, we see them or not. And here, when we look at this, it looks like two separate things, this duality, but actually it's one. So in terms of bringing this into our experience, you know, part of that thing of contemplating it and bringing it, well, how does this relate to me? So I was thinking about, for example, ultimate and relative truth in regards to COVID. And there's this kind of refrain that's been going around of we're all in this together. And when the coronavirus crisis first happened, it really did feel like that we were all in this together, because we're all experiencing the same kind of uncertainty, anxiety, the misery of illness, the loneliness of isolation. It's a great leveler. And because of that, there was this kind of quite profound feeling of connection with everybody who previously were strangers and we're all in the same boat. So yes, we all do experience misery, and isolation and sickness and death. Whether we're rich or poor, whatever, you know, country we're in, we experience that kind of quite profoundly in the same way. But there's another side to it, which is that we're not all in this together. Like they say in Animal Farm, you know, all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. So the experience of COVID, for instance, in the USA or in South America, in Brazil, you know, it's horrendous. The experience of COVID in Australia or in New Zealand that just became COVID-free is quite different. So from one perspective, we're all in it together. How we experience suffering. We all experience suffering and none of us wants to experience suffering. That, yes, we are in together. But from another perspective, we really need to acknowledge the vulnerable. So we're not all in this together. Some people are more fortunate than others, and we have to look after the less fortunate, even if we don't know them. So when the context changes, when we're looking in terms of the context, we need to pay attention to the context and actually act accordingly. And if we want a healthy world, if we want to be healthy, we have to have a healthy world. And to have a healthy world is we have to look after people that we don't normally care about, or that we don't normally notice, or even people that we don't like or agree with. So how do we do that? By remembering that we are all in this together, that fundamentally we're the same, that we don't want to suffer and yet we do, that we want happiness and certainty in a good life and yet we can't find it. So the two go together, don't they? The ultimate and the relative. And they guard against extremism, they guard against nihilism. Having those two views. So it's not an either or. Which is it? With that picture, we might be tempted to go, well, which is the real one? Can you say with that picture, which is the real one? It depends on the perspective, doesn't it? It depends on the circumstances. And those circumstances, though, are changeable. So when we're looking at who we are, for instance, me as a human being, everything that I think is the real me is actually those circumstantial things. It all depends. That's why we get culture shock when we're taken out of our circumstances. We don't even know who we are anymore. When people treat us differently, we feel like we are a different person. If people disrespect us, we start feeling downtrodden. If people tell us we're fantastic, we start feeling entitled. All of those things, it's so circumstantial, and yet we think, oh, this is the real me. But actually, if we're going to look at the real me, who the real me is exactly the same as everybody else. Someone who doesn't want to get coronavirus. It's a nice balance, isn't it? And I like that optical illusion because it reminds us there is a duality when we're functioning in the world, and that way we can function well in the world. And why? Because the context is that one, that we are actually all in this together. We are all the same in wanting happiness and not suffering. So there's my little rave. What questions do you have, folks? What do you think? Questions, comments, other trains of thought? Before we get into, well, what we can do about it. I hope it's arresting enough that you remember it as we go through. Still processing, yeah. So still processing, when we have that thought, what is it really? Remember this picture. So how to develop wisdom? For us beginners, we can call it re-education. How to start educating our mind. How to start being able to live with this duality. If wisdom is infinite, how much is enough? So wisdom doesn't exist out there. Wisdom exists in the mind of you and me, of an Arya, of a Buddha. And so what a Buddha is someone who's developed wisdom to its ultimate degree until there is nothing left to be known. So how much is enough kind of depends on, well, how much suffering is too much. If we want less suffering, we need more wisdom. Is there a way to find out who we truly are? Yes, and this is the way, this analysis. By looking at the appearance of who we think we are, what's called the self-grasping, the one that we hold to and go, this is me. And it's generally the one that really comes up strongly when someone misunderstands us or disrespects us. And we've got to recognize that one is not the real you. It feels like it is, but it isn't. That's like the black and the white buttons. So what we can do to re-educate ourselves, to remember there's there is, and this deals with the seed, the very root causes of all suffering, to remember there's a discrepancy between appearance and reality. So that discrepancy means that, we can actually function in the world. The problem comes that we believe the discrepancy. So, there is a discrepancy with that button, the white and the grey button. There's a discrepancy between how it appears and the reality. That's no problem. We get a beautiful picture, or we could. It's a bit plain, but, the problem is if we go, no, I'm right, you're wrong. If we grasp, hold on to that reality and it as if it was the whole truth and nothing but the truth, but it's not. So to remember there is a discrepancy there, that cognitive fusion, it happens, so we just have to recognize when it's happening. That's the first step. So instead of feeling bad, oh no, I've got cognitive fusion, whenever you spot it happening, go, aha, gotcha. I spot it now. So I've kind of segued from 3 glasses of champagne to three Tim Tams in a row. Same cognitive fusion, little less disastrous results. Again, how to deal with the seed, re-educating ourselves, work on our own mind first rather than abstract philosophy. So if you come to any abstract philosophy, apply it to your experience. And I mean, I love these optical illusions. I've got a book on optical illusions, but why are we so tickled pink by them? Why are they so alluring? Because they can lead us to a deeper truth about the nature of our existence. And optical illusions have that kind of thing that they throw us off kilter, off balance. So instead of just getting more and more optical illusion books, take that experience and apply it to your life. So an optical illusion, it will save us from going to nihilism where we go, oh, well, nothing exists, because that's not right either. An optical illusion does actually exist. And we do actually exist, just not in the way that we think. So you get the abstract philosophy and the optical illusion, whatever, and then you kind of transfer it over to, well, how does that reflect on my experience of my reality? That's also, it's an emotional illusion. So then we have, what we develop is the wisdom of selflessness, meaning not you don't exist at all. It's not the wisdom of nihilism. It's the wisdom of selflessness, meaning no inherent self. That thought, who am I really? There is no really. It depends. Who you are depends on who you're with and the circumstances and your background and your possible future. And all of that is changeable, which is a good thing. It's our way out. Then the other thing, so that's dealing with the seed, that our wisdom or re-educating ourselves can help, is the solutions to do with so-called the media or teachings or advice, religion, philosophy. So one of the things to recognize that we live in what's called a post-truth world, that there isn't just one truth anymore. And in fact, the truth is kind of disintegrated. So to quote William Burroughs, he said, nothing is true, everything is permitted. So when you have everything out of context, unmoored, unhinged, then everything becomes permitted. There's nothing holding you to a responsible kind of approach. When you have an idea that there is an objective truth, oh, we've got to be objective, as if it was possible to take a person out of the situation. So in the post-truth world, this idea of having objective reporting, it's never objective, it's just hidden. All those cultural assumptions and biases. So just to be aware of that. So there is no self because the self is dependent on so many things around it. There is no inherent self. There is a self. It's the one dependent on all the things around it. But there's no inherent self, or there's no real self, or there's no true self. It's just like in that picture, you know, there was a white and a grey thing. It's just it wasn't real or true. So part of the thing with the media is to train in our words. So it's so easy to flip over into, oh, well, there's no self. And I've done it over and over and over again. We've got to use our words to re-educate ourselves. So always put in there, no inherent self or no true self. And then even if you don't get it, just saying the words will help you. And eventually you will get it. Okay, check your sources. That's the next one. So with the media, check your sources. With a spiritual path, with Buddhism, with anything, check your sources. Does it accord with logic? Is it verifiable? Does it sit well with my own experience? Or is it just some theory? It's nothing worse than just a theory, unmoored, unanchored to evidence. And then retrain your thinking and your feeling. So actually retrain how you respond to things. So why did I put a picture of a little kiddie's drawing of a house there? Because, you know, when we first start, we might feel like when we're trying to figure out who we are and the nature of existence, we're just drawing some crude little picture of a house. Well, this one, the chimney's upright, but I remember when I was little, I'd draw the chimney coming out at right angles from the roof. So the chimney even came out at the wrong angle. I couldn't figure out what was wrong with the picture. So it's okay. It's okay to just have a rough line drawing just to train in these words. There is no inherent self. The self exists but is a convention. That's like having this kind of crude line drawing of a house, but eventually, with practice, just naturally, you'll end up being able to draw architectural drawings. They'll end up being like beautiful mandalas. So all those architects and those beautiful, you know, the being able to actually plan your whole house and the chimney coming out the right way, it started off here with a little crude line drawing. So it's okay. Just comes from educating our mind in this really crucial, you know, field of inquiry, which is who am I and what's the meaning of life and the nature of existence, which you would have thought would be the first thing you taught at school. But anyway, and how do we do that? Again, with the media and the teachings, with where we get our information from. How we apply it is to train in words. So your mummy might have used to say, use your words, dear. So our words are so powerful because with our words, we make the world, how we frame things. So it's like saying, oh, that obnoxious child, that bad child. Oh, no, it's that child having bad feelings. It's the child having a tantrum. Oh, it's the child expressing aversion. Ah, it's a suffering child. Ah, it's a budding Buddha screaming to break free. So all of that's using your words, and doesn't that change the reality right there? So if we trained in that so that became our default response, then we'd have more patience with the child or with ourselves. We'd have more compassion because we'd see that its nature is suffering. And we'd have natural confidence because we know liberating our minds from suffering is possible. If we remove the seed, the suffering is gone. So we'll have confidence and courage to help, to put in the effort naturally. So it all comes from first training with the words, using our words. Amazing. So one of the ways that you can do that with whatever's happening in your life, describe it as if you were a reporter. And the benefit of that is that you get different sides, different opinions. Then describe it if you were your parents describing that situation, if it was your best friend describing the situation. And then ultimately you could ask, well, what would the Dalai Lama say? And immediately things will come out kinder. What are they? Wiser and kinder. So it's just a way to get started, because the wisdom, that is the biggest one, and that's the most challenging, and it's the one that we have to work on all the way to enlightenment. And that's why I wanted to do this one first, get the really hard stuff out of the way, but it also sets the context for everything. Now, we've got our summary, the 3 higher trainings, not just for a good life, but for the complete cessation of suffering forever, complete emotional freedom, liberation from cyclic existence, from the machinery of samsara, complete liberation. That's possible. So we have our wisdom that cuts the root of suffering. We've got ethics, the foundation for achieving everything that we want to. That's the strength, the embodied teachings. We've got concentration, the 2 arms. So what holds our wisdom together? Love and this understanding of interdependence, of circumstances, of that, wisdom understanding that ultimate and conventional nature of reality. So those 2 things, they're the two wings of the bird, or the 2 hands. And the cutting that root with the sword of wisdom. Now I have some homework for you to do, and it's one of the ones again to train in words. And it's, is anyone going to be going shopping at all? Shopping in person or shopping online? Shopping's a really good one to get this, to change our habit. So if anyone's going to be going shopping, this is something you can use it as Dharma boot camp instead of just being resentful about how awful shopping is. Is interdependence the same as dependent arising? Yes. Interdependent, dependent arising, conventional reality, they're all synonyms. Relative truth. Yep. So here's the homework. When you're going shopping, use your words and think merely labelled, because that's the kind of the conclusion we come to. Because there is no real self, no inherent self. There is a self. How does it exist? Merely labelled, merely called a self. It's like all of those conditions come together and it's called a self. And so the words that we use is, how do we exist? Merely labelled. By framing it, by calling it this, we bring it into reality. All of those conditions coming together. So when you're looking at the goods on the shelf, and you're looking at all the brands, merely labelled. When you're looking at the object and you start thinking, it's good from its own side, merely labelled. So I do have a homework sheet, and what I'll do is I'll email it all to you tonight. It's just a sheet, a summary on one side, and a couple of reflection questions, like 2 or 3 for this shopping example, to notice how the object appears to you in the shop, and then if you're interested in it, how you get more and more interested, And then notice how you feel about it once you have it and it's yours. Does it wear off or anything like that? So it's a way of kind of unpicking that inherence that we think, just like with the Tim Tams or the champagne, the happiness comes from the thing. And so how to start unwinding it so we can see, it all depends. It's merely labeled. So when the picture of a box of a frozen meal looks nothing like what it happens to, yes, it's merely labeled. That's right. And not just labeled by the brand, but labeled by our attachment. Because it happens more than once, doesn't it? We get excited about something, we buy it, we get it back, it's not as exciting. Now that's happened to me more than once. So it's merely labeled by a mind that grasps that inherence. And then even if the dinner is delicious, you know, after a while, we're expecting it to be delicious forever. But the next night we have to have another dinner. So it actually isn't as great as it's cracked up to be by attachment after all. So it's just a way of getting this habit of questioning, so that when life happens to us, disasters, uncertainty, we also question that. We don't get completely overwhelmed. This is the beginning of being able to overcome all of that stress, anxiety, and depression by really undoing it with that axe, that sword of wisdom. So we've come to our end of our time tonight. I'll email you all within, half an hour or so the homework PDF, and possibly a summary reading from Yangtze Rinpoche, so that you've got something that you can read, and the PowerPoint slides, and then really enjoy just questioning those appearances. Great. So this platform is a transition from face-to-face. Yes, we're all still adapting to it, Beth, that's right. And I keep on forgetting, because I'm quite comfortable on a device, a technology. I really love technology, and I forget other people can find it a little dry sometimes. But also, I think it can be quite intimate, because it's really like we're in each other's lounge room, which I think is just wonderful. So I really like to thank you for just braving everything and coming along, and for interacting and putting things in the chat. And I'll really look forward to seeing you next week. And let's dedicate the merits. So it's like signed, sealed, and delivered. Dedicate all the effort to being able to completely liberate our minds from suffering forever, and then help liberate all other living beings, because they're just like us. And remember that we can do this, because what things are really all depends, so they can change. So remembering emptiness, and remembering for the benefit of everybody. Thank you so much. Enjoy your week. See you soon.